the Baen Free Radio Hour.
On the podcast, a young trader in the midst of a maelstrom, a man at the end of his rope, and a classic of science fiction back in print. All that, plus we continue our ongoing audiobook serialization of Timothy Zahn's Cobra. All right now. Welcome to the Baen Free Radio Hour. It's a pleasure to have you along. I am your podcast host and Baen Associate Editor, David Afsharirad. This week, Griffin Barber sits down with Sharon Lee and Steve Miller to discuss Fair Trade, the latest novel in the landmark Liaden Universe series, which has been running for decades and which has influenced so many great space operas. The book is out now in hardcover and all your favorite ebook formats. We'll get to the interview soon, but first, the news. The May hardcovers and trade paperbacks are in. Let's take a look. First up is Fair Trade by Sharon Lee and Steve Miller. Jeffrey Gobelin has risen far, from despised youngest on a Terran family loot ship to second trader on premier Liaden trade ship, Elthoria. Jeffrey has inherited a mission from his father, a plan that will allow family loot ships like the one he grew up on to survive the encroachment of Rostov's dust. In this, he's backed by several prominent looper families who are scheduled to meet and plan at the South Axis Trade Fair. But the mission will be a test of his loyalties as he's thrust into a tangle of gray trading, mistaken identity, misinformation, and galactic politics. And of course, stay tuned to learn more about Fair Trade when Griffin Barber sits down with Sharon Lee and Steve Miller. Next up, we have Abbott in Darkness by DJ Butler. John Abbott is all in. He's up to his eyeballs in debt to pay for school, and he's just moved his small family 48 light years from Earth for a plum job with the wealthy interstellar corporation, the Sarovar Company. John's first assignment is to discreetly investigate possible corruption at the remote Arrowhawk station, where company traders buy the famous Sarovari weave from the three-sided crab-like weavers. He soon finds evidence of theft and worse. But when the guilty parties realize he's getting close, they come after him and his family. With no way back to Earth, the only direction for John Abbott and his family to go is forward into danger. And finally, a classic of science fiction back in print, The City Who Fought by Anne McCaffrey and S.M. Sterling. Simeon was a shell person, the brain who ran Space Station SSS 900 on the fringes of human space. But things hadn't been going too well lately, and he was more than a little discontented. Though normally he enjoyed his work, these days it seemed boring. To make matters worse, his longtime partner had just retired, and he was having a hard time adjusting to his newly assigned Brawn, a strong-willed woman named Chana Hap, who seemed to feel it her duty to keep him in line. He's buried himself in his favorite pastime, wargaming. Simeon's hobby would soon find unexpected uses when the brutal Kolnari attacked the nearby colony planet Bethel. Sheltering the colony's refugees brought the city an invitation to serious trouble with Kolnari pirates, and only Simeon and Chana, working together, can save the city. That's Fair Trade, Abbott in Darkness, and The City Who Fought, all available now. Can't get enough of Anne McCaffrey? To celebrate the reprinting of The City Who Fought, we're offering ebook discounts on all our McCaffrey backlist. For the month of May, get $1 off every Anne McCaffrey novel we publish. Sale ends May 31st, and this discount is good wherever Baen ebooks are sold. And that's it for the news.
Hello, my name is Griffin Barber. I'm your host today for the Baen Free Radio Hour. Today we're talking with Sharon Lee and Steve Miller. authors of an enormous body of work, the Liaden Universe, as it's most commonly known. But just to talk about them first. Sharon Lee and Steve Miller have been one of the most prolific writing teams of any era, furnishing more than 20 novels and a number of short stories, novellas, and short novels containing additional content for fans of their Liaden Universe. It's been over the last 30 plus years that they've been working together. Both have written other well-received works independent of their shared universe, but one gets the impression that the Liaden Universe is something of a joyful obsession for both authors. This is manifestly a good thing for fans, as we are here to discuss no less than the 24th novel, Fair Trade, forthcoming from Baen Books on May 3rd, 2022. Hello and welcome back, Sharon and Steve.
Thank you very much. Hello.
So as we've done before, I have this kind of cool question that I like to ask. What is the coolest thing about Fair Trade for each of you?
Coolest thing about Fair Trade. Go, Steve.
I think the thing that's cool about Fair Trade is that it kind of tumbled directly out of the the Jethry story that came before. And we had Jethry was one of the fun things that happened to us when somebody said to us once upon a time, gee, I need a story. And Sharon said, I have this character who's been in the back of my head trying to get a scene. And so we did a little short story, and it was called The Balance of Trade. And it turned out that that story wasn't finished, and it ended up 3 or 4 years later being a novel. And it followed through. There was another novel that followed that, and the whole idea of somebody who wanted to be a trader, we wanted to follow it more closely than we had with the other story arcs. So it just
it had legs.
Yeah, for a kid that we were going to use for about 6,000 words and let them go, a tremendous amount.
The coolest thing for me about listen to me now, about Fair Trade is that we got to work the Norbears into a kind of a starring role. The Norbears go way back. They go back to the second novel in the Liaden Universe, Conflict of Honors, when they were like a throwaway thing. I needed to populate a pet library, and I just didn't want dogs and cats and hamsters. So we had pinghorns and we had Norbears, and they were just going to be a passing thing.
Very cool. So you kind of answered this already, Steve, with the exploring the cool with the characters, or did the cool thing create him? So it sounds like it was a lot of Jethry dictating that there was more story to be told there. Is that accurate?
It is accurate. Jethry turned out to be very popular with our fans, and not only that, Jethry was actually an outgrowth of the Crystal section, the Crystal books, which were Crystal Soldier and Crystal Dragon, which were the precursor books in effect for the entire series, but we didn't write them first. We knew that they were going to be coming, but they were hanging around in the background.
Jeffrey's kind of a bridge book between the Crystal Universe and the current Liaden Universe.
Well, that was one of the things I appreciated about Jethry. As an aside, is I grew up in the States and in Europe, and kind of feel like a third culture kid. And he's not only, kind of a third culture kid having grown up in one place, but he also has, if not a mixed parentage, then certainly an adoptive heritage that is of both mixed parentage from the Liaden side and the Terran, and even a subset of the Terrans with Loopers. I thought that identified with him as a character for that, just because he's constantly having to shift gears between his communications with different groups or groupings of people. Really found that fascinating, and again, well done. So the getting on to your answer, Sharon, with the coolness, so you were basically like, I want to do some more stuff with the Norbears and kind of make them
No, the Norbears have been growing. They were a throwaway, but they didn't want to be a throwaway. Well, you see how pushy Norbears are. And they have kind of had a growing presence in the series as we went along. At the end of Trade Secret, Balance of Trade, Trade Secret, Fair Trade, the Norbears show up very briefly at the end of Trade Secret. And Steve then felt compelled, as did Dulcimer, the ship Dulcimer, and Steve then felt compelled to write a short story called Out of True, to explain what Dulcimer was doing there at that particular time and what they had in the hold that they didn't want anybody to see.
Right.
This is how we connect the stories, and something suggests itself where a character says, you know what, you have to tell people more about us.
Yeah. Well, and it's one of the things I've noted just in the small portion I've been able to read of your vast universe is that you do a lot of that, of tying up threads that, you can't necessarily do unless you have the body of work you guys do. So there's a thread that I had way back when that I'd like to pull on, or that readers like to ask about, and that kind of stuff. And then you found ways to bring them forward into new stories. It's really neat. And especially, given a long established universe where you're able to still do something new and different. It's neat. So without getting too spoilery, one of my favorite parts of Fair Trade was the interaction between the crew of Dulcimer and their difficulties in making people, crew or otherwise, understand that the Norbears they are in contact with are actual people. It touched me. While most people were not capable of understanding the aliens, those few who could had to overcome prejudices against themselves in order to champion the others. Was that a built-in concept as you wrote it? Or was it, again, like the Norbears are pushing your buttons to try and get you to tell their story?
Norbears push, but I think Steve came up with Swifthy and the fact that she is out of True, that her family just knows she's the weird one, and she counts, and she wants to examine things and understand things. And her family is kind of like, yeah, well, she's a slow one, never mind. She doesn't even have to have a ship's drawl. She's lucky we just take her around with us. Right. And the advent of the Norbears and the ability to communicate with the Norbears, which Squiffy has helped straighten her thinking out, so that she doesn't have as much noise in her head, and she's able to fully come into herself. So it's a really beneficial kind of relationship with the Norbears.
And actually, it goes back to several other scenes dealing with Norbears. One in which, and I can't tell you which book it happens to be in right now, where one of the characters is told, "You come over here and you deal with the Norbears." Well, I don't want to deal with the Norbears. They don't want to deal with me. And I have to be a little bit careful, because there are books that you haven't seen, that you haven't seen, because they're not necessarily finished yet. And since we've got these things started along the way, I think, did we publish that one yet or not? You have to be
that is Patty. That is
Yep.
Patty. They put her in yes, Trader's Leap. They put her in charge of the pet library. They put her specifically in charge of the Norbears, because Patty needs to be sorted out. And the Norbears don't like her, she says.
And
she's too aloof.
And so that's already been worked in, and so these other chances to work with the Norbears are interesting, and also the other chance to work with characters who are not everyday strong superior beings and that kind of thing. Which when we started the series, there were so many strong superior people in all of everybody was better than everybody else. And, you just knew they walked on the scene that they were going to be super at this or super at that.
Right.
So we've worked in characters along the way who are not super, who in fact who have I shouldn't say disabilities, but who are otherwise enabled. One of the characters that we got to work with, for example, was a woman who worked in a sort of a trash spaceship where she worked in the yard of a. Well, why that? Well, because we have known people who managed to work doing what they wanted to do or what they needed to do, who were just not presentable in ordinary society, if you will, but were strong people and did what they needed to do. So we'd like to make sure that the characters that we deal with have to interact with people who are not all strong supermen too, as it were.
Right. Realism.
And that they have to come into contact with people who are doing what they want to do on their own terms. Because that's an important lesson too. You can't just always do what everybody wants you to do.
Yeah. Well, I really admired the Squithy thing and that progress that she goes through. It's not only the internal progress that she's going through, but at each stage of self-improvement, she's having to indicate for everybody else, hey man, I'm improving, because everybody else has fixed in their head. Everybody has a fixed image of what that person's about based on their past experience of that person. And again, it was remarkably well done. I really, really, really liked that. And using the mechanism of the Norbears to kind of help her along, but also kind of saddle her with a problem that only she can solve until such time as, some of the other characters get involved. I thought that was remarkably well done and neat storytelling for the fans. I think they're going to really dig that. And then kind of getting into a little bit of the nitty gritty. There's the scene where they're forming a circuit. I'm a huge fan of like collective consciousness things and that kind of thing. So just kind of wondering if you've already worked out whether or not that circuit increases their processing power or their intelligence, or if it's just for sharing data amongst the participants so that they have a smooth flow of information rather than having to speak about it.
It's a difficult concept, but if you look at meetings where people are doing where us people, currently where people start sharing ideas in a hurry, this idea, what about this, where you do brainstorming. Well, what happens? Did everybody in the circuit get smarter, or is it the idea of the sharing automatically, or the sharing can pull in these different things and make the result of a brainstorming session better and stronger? Well, it's part of that, and it's part of it we can't go into because we have stories ahead.
Okay, cool. That's even better news, because I want to know more. So getting on beyond that, so did the creation of this arc of stories arise from a desire to further explore individual characters' lives, like Jethry, or the Norbears, or the trade portion of the world building that you'd set up, or both, or a combination of all of you? I'm expecting a yes here.
Jeffrey did not start as an arc. He started as a short story. Warren Lapine came to us and said, you guys need to write me a story for Absolute Magnitude. And we went, okay. So we wrote him a story for Absolute Magnitude. As Steve said, we had this character hanging around, and an idea for, so how did Liadens and Terrans start trading with each other instead of trying to keep aloof from each other because of cultural differences? And we thought, well, that would make a nice little story for the magazine. So we wrote that. And this is kind of how things work. The story did well for the magazine. That was good. Warren was happy. We were happy. The check cashed, all the good things happened for the story. And then Steve Pickle said, who was our book editor at the time, our publisher at the time, said to us, so what are you writing for me next? And we went, well, we could expand Jeffrey. I mean, there's to tell about what happened after the end of the short story. And he went, okay. So we wrote a novel. And I think I was lead on that novel. And I said to Steve at the end of the novel, I said, no more teenagers. I'm not writing any more teenagers. And Steve said, okay. And we went on and we wrote other things. And a couple of years later, he came and he said, I'm writing the Jeffrey book. I said, you're writing the Jeffrey book. He said, yes. I said, fine.
The thing with teenagers, that is to say, we worked with Theo, we've worked with Patty, and some of them were really work to have to do. I mean, it wasn't necessarily a simple thing to try to put, cast yourself back into that moment when you were as confused as they were, and rightly so. But Jeffrey also had the other connections, and he has connections. I don't want to give too many spoilers, but he does have connections to the Crystal books, which were the books that took place before the Liadens left the old universe that was collapsing around them. And so he's got a very strong connection there, and he's got a very strong connection to the uncle. And the uncle has
recurring characters.
Yeah,
and just throwaways.
And the uncle was somebody that we needed for the Crystal books, but it turned out that he was actually far more pervasive than that. And we have a number of the characters that have done the same thing. So yes, we'd like to go back. It's not that we want to go back to the well too often, but rather that we see that the well is there and we don't have to create entire new people, as long as we can find the connections for ourselves and for our readers.
Well, and not being incredibly familiar with the universe, I really liked the uncle. It took a different direction than I had anticipated in their conversation, which was kind of fraught in their interactions. That was neat. I like to think I'm not easily surprised, and it kind of went and took a left turn. I was, oh, okay. So that was fun. I don't know would people be that are familiar with more familiar with the universe be less surprised than I was, or?
Hard to tell. The uncle is a surprising character by nature.
Yeah.
Being, can I say so old? Being so old, he has a really different take on how things should be, and he's also, long sight is not even. I'm working with something right now that had the uncle playing in it earlier, and the quote from his sister is, "Yes, Yuri looks at the ages."
Yeah, that's one thing to, it's always fascinated me is that when you have somebody that's long lived, their mindset's going to be different if they're if they think in long term, think long term. I always kind of was fascinated with that idea, but like, if you lived for a couple hundred years, what would your outlook be on daily aggravations? Would it be more patient or less patient?
Because you're being aggravated and you have important things to do.
Yeah, right. So I'm always kind of fascinated by that. So is this more of an exploration of the trade stuff in this arc than we've seen previously? Is this the first time we're seeing a Congress?
Oh, yes. Yes, there's the way trading has been shown previously has largely been ship to ship or person to person. We've seen Sean doing some trading. We've seen them in a couple of cases. We've seen I have to remember all the names of the ships. There's the Balrog having come back from doing some trading. We've seen the different, and but those have always been seen as taking place in an area where trade goes on, but without seeing the necessary encumbrances of how do you make money flow, how do you do that kind of thing. So it's a little bit of that kind of fill-in. We can't get too involved with it. I will tell you that very early on in the Liaden universe, we had people asking us, well, how much is a contra worth exactly?
All right.
And that's very very much like saying how much is a dollar worth exactly.
How
Right.
much is a dollar worth in Maine and how much is a dollar worth in California? They're two
Exactly.
totally different sums.
Absolutely. Well, and so that was it. That's interesting to me because I was like, I was taken in by the whole conference. The Congress was really cool. And it rang to me as like, this is something that's going on before, because you have characters who have participated in previous ones, but that everyone seemed to have certain expectations of what this was about. So it was, again, really well presented, and that I felt like it was something you guys had talked about before. And you know, you weren't blowing by details. You were just providing, yeah, this is the way it is, and the characters are all kind of comfortable with it. And it's while it's Jeffrey's first Congress for this particular type of thing, or I think it is his first Congress, right?
Right.
This is Congress, he was a baby during the second one, the first
Yeah,
one.
and he's you know, everybody's telling, well, you know, the pre-Congress, and then there's the pre-Congress, which immediately resonated for me for like the bigger conventions, right?
Yep.
You know, the first few days of the convention, or before the convention, it's always everybody's sneaking in and, you know, trying to have dinner or whatever with their friends, and then it kind of goes up and it picks up in pace and intensity as you go
And then you
along.
get to the real event, yes.
Yeah, and that was one thing you conveyed really, really well about this Congress, was that was going on. I guess that's a big spoiler, but it's kind of one of the main things that's going on, right?
And anybody who's been to a science fiction convention knows this. Actually, Jeffrey, in Balance of Trade, Jeffrey went from unwanted son of a small Sharon trade ship, a loop ship, to the apprentice of a Liaden trader. And he's learning simultaneously how to be a trader and how to be a Liaden, or at least how to deal with Liadens, so that he doesn't offend them, so he can trade with them. In Trade Secret, he needs to recover a birthright from his father's side of the family and decide what to do with that birthright, that will not offend either Liadens or loopers. In this one, Jeffrey is almost having to learn how to be a politician. He needs to get some stuff done, and it's really serious, life-threatening stuff. And he's got to trade on a whole different level.
And there's the additional level of, he's mostly dealt with trading Liadens and trading Terrans and loopers, and now all of a sudden he's having to deal with the concept of people who live on planets because they want to.
Yeah, who would do that?
And he's a focal point for all of these people trying to figure out what it means, what he's trying to do, and what they're going to do.
What's in it for them?
All right, and what exactly what he can do for them, not just what is in for it, but what can you do for me? There were a couple of scenes where that was illustrated quite clearly with the kinship stuff, where somebody's trying to claim kinship with him, and he's like,
Lady, yeah.
Lady, no. So again, really fascinating stuff. I thought that was fun. So I'm glad to know that this is going to turn a page for a bunch of readers, or they're going to be able to see how the sausage is made as far as this the trading system is concerned, without knowing what the value of a dollar is. So was that part of the whole goal, was to kind of show this, or is this more of a transition, a setup for what comes after in the next couple of books?
Well, the next book, Steve is writing the next book as we sit here. And Jeffrey has a lot on his plate. I can't say much more than that.
And we also have, nope, that's too much of a spoiler. I can't talk too much more about Squithy there.
Yeah. Well, it seems to me that she's on an upward trajectory to learn stuff, but she also has a bunch of challenges coming her way that are from left field, because she's in a new circumstance. So I was interested to see how that turns out. So I'm going to be, regardless of whether we're doing interviews for this upcoming one, I will be reading it, because I want to know what's going on. So was there anything that you, as you were working on it, that you were kind of like, well, I'm going to need to tackle this further down the road, or that you were like really excited about and were kind of, I want to cram it in?
But we have one of the problems, again, because we have brought the Norbeers in, and because we have brought in a certain amount of trade, we've now got to be able to show why there's not always a smooth transition from, well, this was 200 years ago or whatever. Why isn't it that much better now? But the way the universe works is not always straightforward. And there's, I hate to use the word I learned way back when, but there's kind of a dialectic going on here, where one side says, this is what we're going to do. And the other side says, no, it's not. And they said, yes, it is. We're doing it. And then the other side says, well, ho, ho, and pushes back again. So that goes on. And that has something that's always been in the books too, is the fact that progress isn't straightforward. Just because you've managed to do it this time, you don't always stay where you were. You have to go back and do it again in some cases.
Yeah, reinvent the wheel.
Problem with saving the world if it doesn't stay saved. Yes.
Yeah, no, that's an excellent point. We're just going on to the next. We stumble from emergency to emergency. So I'm also interested in the loopers. I kind of found them fascinating as a culture, and how they're the kinship, everything. It almost is reminiscent of Romani kind of stuff, or that kind of thing.
Well, they're an insular group that has traveled together, and they share a culture, and they share. There's the ongoing joke that all loopers are cousins on port,
Right?
Because that makes it easier to deal with port security. Oh no, he's my cousin. I'll take care of him. It's fine. And in a lot of cases, loopers are cousins. They keep their books, they keep their lineage. As a matter of fact, Jeffrey has to deal with that at one point, because all these people are storming in saying, hey, we're related. And he's like, I don't know these people. And Fred is having the kids on the ship go through the books, go through the records, and find out, is that true or not? No, you don't got to talk to that guy. He's crazy. He's not related to anybody. But it is just because it's a small, weird, insular culture, it doesn't mean that it's not working for the people who live in it. And the setup of the conflict between the administrators who live on worlds and who just can't figure out why you just, space is this real inconvenience, and you get on a ship and you go someplace, but you go to the place, you just don't live on the ship. And what's the point of that?
Right.
And so just settle on a world. It'll be easier for you. And the loopers are like, no, we can't. We have to stay with our ships. That's where we live.
Well, and how the administrators try to tie the planet-born administrators try and tie them up. And we're gonna keep this in committee until it's too late to do it any other way than the way we want you to do it. I thought was really, really clever, because that is a valid tactic that works, but it's also really annoying if you're trying to get things done.
It's a tear and dirty trick. Yes, it is.
Yeah. And was there a particular model that you had in mind for that administrator?
I don't know. Steve, did you?
Not a single particular person, but rather a set of people. And I will bring this back from the larger world of politics down to something a little smaller that I experienced myself when I was at UMBC as curator of science fiction. I was in charge of a great science fiction collection, and the various departments would come in and steal my money. They would say, okay, we need a little bit more money right now to buy this. We need a little bit more money right now to buy that. And because of the faculty senate and the way much of the things work, the ability for me to work as an individual collector for the library it pretty well got stamped on by people who said, well, we're going to be doing this because we need to expand here, we need to expand here, and they had voices. And it kind of worked like, I lived through that.
Yeah.
They knew how the system worked
Yeah.
too, and they used it.
Oh, and I got that reading it. It really does read like a kind of a political thriller in portions where you're talking about all this stuff, especially again, from the point of view of just like a congoer. And we're all here on our individual business, but we're also trying to talk about these things that are really important. And he's going from panel to panel talking about really important stuff. And then he's having to field, questions from the cousin that wants to be. I just loved that whole idea of that aspect of not just politics, but also trying to get something bigger than yourself, more important than any individual off the ground. I thought that was just really, really well done. So this resonated for me quite a bit in the last couple of weeks as I've been working with other stuff. So, as I read it, I really did appreciate some of these sequences. So I thank you for that.
Well, thank you.
There's also you guys touch on so many different things in this. There's black market or gray market stuff going on. There's trying to get clean after being known for being a bad actor or a shady character. And there's trying to bring you back into that life. There's people refusing to believe you when you say you're out of that life. I mean, I really was impressed at the scope and a not terribly long novel of stuff you guys touched on that is really important to the human condition. So I think that's kind of the best thing about science fiction, and certainly about this particular story. Like I said, I was really touched by the way the aliens needed a translator, and how those translators weren't necessarily seen as the best people in the first place, and had to overcome just being who they were in order to champion somebody else, which is probably the best way to human growth I can even think of, is to, in order to help somebody else, improve yourself. So again, really cool.
Have to do this for somebody else and we can't screw up. What was the other quote? Oh, there ain't no money in straight. That was one of the.
Right.
Yeah. So I guess we can kind of move from there. There's a lot of cool characters in Fair Trade. My favorite was kind of a split between Squithy or Freza, I think it is, from the Balrog.
Yep.
And they're both from that looper culture, but I got the impression that Freza's, the Balrog is much more well accepted than in their trade practices, et cetera, than the well connected than the Dulcimer and that family. Is that correct?
That is correct.
And again, I liked Squithy for the reasons I already talked about, that she's, personal growth and trying to help somebody else. Which character from this would you most want to meet?
I'd actually want to talk to Tran, Squithy's captain, because he's got a lot. He's got not only is his not too bright baby sister suddenly she's doing what? But the desire to go straight and to toe the line and to not fall back into the temptation of making the money, because it's easy to make money gray. It's not easy to make money straight. That's just how it is. So I would actually like to talk to Tran. He's coming along. I was a little afraid for him for a while.
And recovering from an injury and the whole thing. Yeah. So how are you, Steve?
I'm writing the follow one. So it's a little bit of a difficulty for me to try to step back right now, because I've been dealing with these people and putting them on the page, and I'm afraid I'd hesitate to try to make a favorite right now, because they're in my head. Right. And
you don't want to tell them that there's a special one in your place.
Dad loves Freza best,
And the other problem there is that if I say that if I designate somebody, I'm afraid that I will then warp the words that are coming out of the fingers in that favor, and I would really want that to stay to
Whoops.
there.
Yay.
Um,
Okay.
I'm sorry, this is hand motion here. You can't see. I'm doing this as I'm talking, and it's all below the camera level. So, so I just hit mute accidentally. But go ahead, Sharon.
The Denobles, Freza is a Denobli, Balrog is a Denobli ship, and there are lots of Denobli cousins everywhere. But they are a very important family among the loopers. So yeah, there's a lot of difference between Freza and Squithy socially, and even the drive. I mean, Squithy's drive is to help the Norbears and to make sure that these things that are patently wrong do not continue to be wrong. And Freza is just a little bulldozer. She is organized out to teeth.
Right.
And
well, I almost had the, Squithy could be Freza in 20 years.
Yeah,
if things fall right for her. Right?
If she decides she wants to do that.
Right. Yeah. Definitely. Yeah. So that the follow-on question is always, well, so which character would you not want to be? Would you want to avoid?
That's a spoiler for me because the character is new in the book, and I would cheerfully murder him.
I think I know who that is.
Okay.
Yeah. He's been mentioned before. He's in the book, but he's been mentioned before. But and I will tell you that he had an antecedent. He had in again in my own situation, when I say this person, when I write his name down, I am thinking of this one particular person, and who was just so overbearing, just so sure, just so willing to kick somebody when they were down. And I say this as somebody who was literally kicked when I was down by that person. So this is a character that I invest with all kinds of energy.
Yeah. He comes across that way. That character comes across that way. They're definitely not somebody you want to hang out with. And again, those faultless writing as far as portraying an individual, and because their motives are clear. It's just that they choose to go about accomplishing their goals in a really vile way. So really,
why
really cool.
Why don't you just agree with me? Everything will be much
exactly. And I'm going to remove all your options from agreeing with me if I can. Yeah. So yeah, very much, very cool. So which character would you want as an ally?
Oh, the uncle. We always want the uncle as an ally.
Except some people don't, because he is the uncle and he is too strange, and he is too he has a reputation because he knows about all the stuff that's gray market, and he knows about the stuff that could be black market, and you don't know why he knows about it. You don't know. So he's not a careful person to be around. And the scouts have regularly had run-ins with the uncle, or because he's there doing what he's doing when they want to be the people who make sure that everything goes their way.
For me, he seemed to be almost like a Merlin.
A Merlin. Oh,
Merlin.
He's mellowing. We got to do something about that.
Well, some of the original Merlins were not so mellow. He just seemed to me like he's a man of mystery. There's some dark stuff going on there. You don't want to know. I'm not going to tell you. I sleep with dragons, kind of thing. So, and you're not qualified to do what I do, kid. I thought that was neat, and not necessarily where your Jethry is necessarily King Arthur, more in the lines of he's Morgana. Like, you're not qualified to do the stuff I do, girl. You haven't done it. Kind of thing. I really, again, like I said, it took a different direction than I thought it was going to do, and boy, did I like it. So very cool. So you got all these trade situations, and they especially seem to require changes in mode and changes in cultural accessories and how you speak, bowing, etc. And also fashion, just pretty much everything about how you comport yourself and how you interact is influenced by which people you're trying to communicate between or to. So given the choice, would you be loopers or Liadens in this trader context?
Trader context. I'm gonna have to go with looper. So, you know, I want to say Liaden, but no, looper. Because the loopers are doing a much better job accommodating the various Liadens in Jeffrey's crew and trying to meet them halfway. Now Jeffrey has an unusual crew. Than Liadens in general do when they're trying to interact with Terrans and with looper traders. So I would have to go there. They're open-minded.
I would say loopers too, and I wonder how much of this is from our own background. When we were for several years we were book dealers, not only at conventions but at other places, and we were dealing with people who might walk up to you and say, hey, look what I just found, would you like something like this? And it could be that it was a little gold coin, or it could be that it was an earring, or I just could be because we were working the edge of flea markets and the edge of conventions and the edge of
Respectability.
which
Just the edge of respectability.
well, sometimes yes, even the edge of respectability, and sometimes you had to be, somebody would come up and offer you something and you say, we really can't afford it, just such and such, and you'd kind of look at it and you wonder, what truck did that fall off of? And so no, but we did have some years where we were living in a in the edge situation, and I think we sort of brought some of that to what we've been doing, because most of the people that we actually dealt with who were in that situation were really good people.
Yeah.
And we tried, so I think that does inform some of what we write.
Oh yeah, definitely. And that was one of the things that for me, I do like the precision and the knowledge that if you're acting properly, you're treated properly in the Liaden universe. Like it's pretty much a given. Like if you say the right things, you will be treated at least this well, right?
You will be given this amount of courtesy. Yes.
Exactly. And I think that's really cool, because I more often than not, I don't want to know what a stranger's thinking of me. I just want them to be polite, right?
Yes, we want to interact correctly and get done whatever it is we're getting done.
Yeah, let's move on. Let's get to our next thing. So I really, for that particular thing, I really like the Liaden, but I also like the loopers' general acceptance of there's more than one way to do this. There's more than one way to skin a cat, and the individual crews and the cousins and the families, they can all figure it out. And when push comes to shove, we're about helping each other out, not, enforcing some social pressures to make everybody conform. I thought that was really, again, is a neat aspect of that you're able to kind of point out with Jeffrey and his multiculturality kind of thing he's got going. So, well, that's a cool, both of those are really cool answers. Especially the whole, like from experience, right? Because we write what we know, we delve into what our personal experiences of what this might be like. Despite the fact that, well, at least I know I haven't been a captain of a ship or a trade principal, anything like that. So as a kind of a penultimate question, what aside from the entertainment value are you hoping readers will carry with them after reading Fair Trade?
That's a hard one, because I don't think I try to hope that they invest any particular thing. We have found over time, yes, we've been doing the Liaden stuff since the first one was published in 1988. We have found that people take so much away from the books, and some of it's surprising. Some of it, we've had people say to us, this is a literal thing that several people have said. I was in the hospital and dying, and I told them to bring me your next book because I wasn't going to die before I read it. And they got better because they had something that, well, no, it's not our book that did it, obviously.
Right.
But the thing is that we've brought that kind of thing. When people come to us and say, I want to use this scene as part of my wedding ceremony. Is it okay if we use these phrases in our wedding? And so you never know quite what you're going to affect people, and we just want to write on and get the material down there, and people will take from it what they can or what they will. And it's been we've had so much support from that. I try not to designate what people should think, I think.
Right.
And our readers reread our books. We hear it all the time. Yes, I just reread the Liaden books. They're so wonderful. I find something different every time I read one of your books. So I think that's the process. I mean, the process is we write the book, the reader reads the book, and they get something different than we put down, but it's still a value to them.
Yeah, and it continues the legacy of what you've already done as far as providing somebody with entertainment, but they can also reread and live for. So that's great. I really appreciate you guys taking the time to talk with me and speak about fair trade. Just a last question here. We have what conventions can your fans hope to catch up with you? And obviously we have another trade arc story coming. But is there any, is that under contract? Is there a time frame for that?
We just signed a contract for 3 more books.
Sweet.
For Baen.
So
Steve is writing a book.
okay, I'm working on Trade Lane, and
Okay.
Trade Lanes will be turned in September. Sharon is writing a book which is much further along and which will be turned in
June. And it is called Salvage Right. It takes place on Tinsory Light, which is another accidental kind of an arrangement. It was a short story. Well, it was a epigraph at the top of a chapter first.
Wow.
And then it was a short story, and then it grew from there. Cool place, Tinsory Light. And that's due in June, and it will come out, Tony tells me, next spring.
and it is likely then that, and Trade Lanes will likely come out next fall. They're trying to see if they can't get it in the year. And
we'll be at Worldcon.
you know,
We have train tickets.
we have our tickets and our rooms set up for Worldcon, so we do intend to be there. And we're also going to be guests of honor in April of next year at a convention called Heliosphere, which is in New York, and it's to follow. I'm sorry.
In New Jersey.
Oh, that's right, New Jersey. It is the follow-on to the to a long-time New York convention which folded, and so Helios.
Oh, okay, I didn't realize that they had folded and now they're re-upping in New Jersey. I hadn't realized.
LunaCon folded. It was a very long-running convention, and
I went to it in New York.
Okay.
Yeah.
So, and they stopped after a while, and the people in the area said, you know what, we miss going to a con at this time of year, and we're going to have another con. So they were.
So Heliosphere has asked us to be guests of honor. They're just over their convention from 2022. So if you go to heliospherenewyork.com, you're going to find the old information up, but they will be coming along sometime very soon, and you'll be able to get us there. And that will be in New Jersey, and I'm going to forget, Piscataway, New Jersey, in April. And after that, we're not really sure where else we'll be going. There's a lot of chance, and so much of it depends on the writing schedule these days. That
well, and then so hopefully somebody might have Sharon Lee Steve Miller book in their hand, brand new book for that Heliosphere Guest of Honor junket, right?
That
Yeah.
could work.
Yeah, cool. All right, well, thanks again. I appreciate you coming on the show, and can't wait to see your book on shelves and out there in everybody's hands.
Okay.
Thank you very
for
much.
having us. Had a good.
And now we bring you Timothy Zahn's Cobra. Earth's only hope was the Cobras. The colony worlds Adirondack and Silvern fell to the Troft forces almost without a struggle. Outnumbered and on the defensive, Earth made a desperate decision. It would attack the aliens not from space, but on the ground, with forces the Trofts did not even suspect. Thus were created the Cobras, a guerrilla force whose weapons were surgically implanted, invisible to the unsuspecting eye, yet undeniably deadly. But power brings temptation, and not all the Cobras could be trusted to fight for Earth alone. Johnny Moreau would learn the uses and abuses of his special abilities and what it truly meant to be a Cobra.
It was the first time Johnny had been in his room since his 2-week stint in surgery had begun, but it looked about as he remembered. Heading straight for his bunk, he collapsed gratefully into it, wincing at the unexpectedly loud protest from the bed's springs. Pure imagination, of course. He wasn't that much heavier, despite all the new hardware he was carrying around. Stretching his sore muscles, he gingerly probed the bruises on his arms, wondering if he could survive 4 more weeks of this. His 5 roommates arrived a minute or so behind him, coming in as a group and obviously in the middle of comparing notes on the day. "Tell you, all Army trainers act like assembly robots," Callie Halloran was saying as they filed through the door. "It's part of the toughening up process for the recruits. Psychology, troops, psychology." "Fridge on psychology," Parnofsky opined, leaning over the end of his bunk and doing some half-hearted stretching exercises. "That whole farrago about eating lunch 10 meters up, you call that toughening up? I tell you, Bai just likes making us sweat." "It proved you could hang on without devoting your entire attention to your fingers, didn't it?" Immel Deutsch countered dryly. "Like I said," Halloran nodded. "Psychology." Nofke snorted and abandoned his exercises. "Hey, Druma, Roland, get in here and join the party. We got just enough time for a round hand of King's Bluff." "In a minute," Druma Singh's soft voice called from the bathroom where he and Roland Viljo had vanished. Johnny had noticed the pale blue of heel-quick bandages on Singh's hands when they entered, and guessed Viljo was helping the other change the dressings. "You too, Mr. Answer Man," Nofke said, looking in Johnny's direction. "You know how to play King's Bluff?" "Answer Man?" "I know a version of the game, but it may be just a local one," he told Nofke. "Well, let's find out." The other shrugged, stepping to the room's circular table and pulling a deck of cards from a satchel sitting there. "Come on, Reginine rules say you can't turn down a card game when it's not for money." "Since when do Reginine rules apply on Asgard?" Viljo demanded as he strolled in from the bathroom. "Why not play Earth rules, which state that all games are for money?" "Airy rules are that you play for real estate," Halloran offered from his bunk. "Horizon rules," Johnny began. "Let's not reach too far into the Dominion backwaters, eh?" Viljo cut him off. "Perhaps we should just go to sleep," Singh said, rejoining the group. "We'll undoubtedly have a busy day tomorrow." "Come on," Deutsch beckoned, joining Nofke at the table. "A game will help us all settle down. Besides, it's these little things that help mold people into a team. Psychology, Callie, right?" Halloran chuckled, rolling out of bed and back onto his feet. "Unfair. All right, I'm in. Come on, Johnny. Up. Druma, Roland. Reginine rules, like the man said. 1 round only." The game that Nofke described turned out to be almost identical to the King's Bluff Johnny was familiar with, and he felt reasonably confident as they launched into the first hand. Winning was completely unimportant to him, but he very much wanted to play without making any foolish mistakes. Viljo's jibe about the Dominion backwaters had finally crystallized for him exactly why he felt uncomfortable with this group. With the exception of Deutsch, all the others came from worlds older and more distinguished than Horizon, and Deutsch, as the only Cobra trainee from Adirondack, had obvious status as native authority on one of the 2 worlds the Trofts had captured. Most of the others weren't as blatant in their condescension as Viljo, but Johnny could sense traces of it in all of them. Proving he could play a competent game of cards might be a first step toward breaking down whatever stereotypes they had of frontier planets in general, and Johnny in particular. Perhaps it was his indifference toward winning, aiding his merely average tactical skills, or perhaps it was small differences in body language giving his bluffs an unexpected edge. Whatever the reason, the round hand wound up being the best he'd ever played. Out of 6 games, he won 1 outright, Bluff won 2 others, and lost another only when Nofke stubbornly stayed with a hand that by all rights should have died young. Viljo suggested a second round, virtually demanded one in fact, but Singh reminded them of the agreed-upon limit, and the game dissolved into a quiet flurry of bedtime preparations. For several minutes after lights out, Johnny replayed the game in his mind, searching every remembered nuance of speech and manner for signs that the social barriers were at least beginning to crack. But he was too tired to make much headway and soon gave up the effort. Still, they could have left him out of the game entirely, and his last thought before drifting off was that the next 4 weeks might be survivable after all. The first week of training saw a great deal of practice with the servo system, activation of the optical and auditory enhancers, and the first experience with weapons. The small lasers built into their little fingers, the trainees were told, were designed chiefly to be used on metals, but would be equally effective in short-range anti-personnel applications. Baen emphasized that for the moment, the power outputs were being held far below lethal levels, but Johnny found that of limited comfort as he practiced against the easily melted solder targets. With anywhere up to 72 lasers being fired across the range at any given time, it didn't take much imagination to picture what a careless, servo-supplemented twitch of someone's wrist could do. The semi-automatic targeting capabilities, when added, just made things worse. It was all too easy to shift one's gaze with the variable visual lock activated and wind up firing at the wrong target entirely. But luck, or Bai's training, proved adequate, and by the time the last of those sessions was over, Johnny could stand amid the flickering lights without wincing. At least not much.
That was another installment in Timothy Zahn's Cobra, and that's it for the news. Thanks as always to Audible.com and podcast theme composer Ruth Judkowitz. Thanks to Griffin Barber, and praise, thanks, and gratitude to Sharon Lee and Steve Miller for talking with us today. And good night, Tony Daniel, wherever you are. This is David F. Shirerod coming to you from a soundproof bunker somewhere deep in the heart of Texas. Join us here next week at the hammering heart of science fiction and fantasy, and keep reaching for the stars.